What's up, everyone? It's Chris, back again with episode 11 of What Could Have Been in Wrestling. This one has been a few weeks coming, and I want to say thank you to Harold Warren 2155. That is his YouTube, at least, username. He was the one who sent me this suggestion originally. This topic is one I alluded to a few videos back, but then I decided I wanted to break it up in terms of the order I did these. But this topic is in regards, again, going back to Triple H. And this is a topic that has definitely been discussed a lot, and a lot of it's been recapped and rehashed and recreated. This is about the infamous Curtain Call incident of 1996. And Harold wrote on one of my videos he wanted to see what I think could have been if this Curtain Call incident didn't happen, and mainly how it affected Triple H's career. So let's go back to what this is actually if you're not aware. There's 100 different videos talking about this, so you've probably, especially if you've been watching wrestling for any significant length of time, you've definitely heard about this. This was in 1996, like I mentioned, in May of 96, where WWF sold out Madison Square Garden. And in this event, Triple H, at the time, known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, defeated Razor Ramon, who went on to become just wrestling by his regular name, Scott Hall, in his, at the time, final match in the WWF. And Shawn Michaels defeated Diesel as WWF champion in a steel cage match before he left as well for WCW. After the match, they're celebrating. Well, Shawn Michaels is celebrating. Kevin Nash is laid out. And Scott Hall enters the ring. Comes up and he hugs Shawn Michaels. Then enter a very young Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He comes in and he embraces both guys. And then Diesel, or Kevin Nash, whatever you want to call him, gets up and all four hug and raise each other's arms. And that's the scene a lot of people know as the Curtain Call incident. Because at this time, wrestling was not like what it is today, where the curtain is pulled so far back, where you have the documentaries of guys getting ready for matches, talking about past title wins, and now even times in previous promotions, such as WCW or TNA. Back then in the 90s, the curtain was very, very protected, or at least they tried to. And they didn't want to expose that these guys who were playing heel and baby faces were actually friends. So with that in mind, from what I've been told, I know Jim Cornette was not happy about it. Kevin Nash has said he was in the room with Pat Patterson, and he said he got permission from Vince, and Vince apparently told him, if this is important to you, you can do it. And of course, with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash leaving, they weren't going to suffer any blowback on this. And Shawn Michaels, as champion, again, all four of them exposing the business, showing that even though they're good guys and bad guys, are actually best of friends, he's not going to get any of the heat because he's the WWF champion, and at that time, especially with Bret Hart, his contract in limbo at the time and not wrestling, he was the biggest star in their company. So it all fell on one guy, Triple H. And again, at the time, known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Triple H talks about this in his DVD, Thy Kingdom Come. And he talks about, obviously, what Vince told him after. And he told him, you'd better like the taste of shit, because you're going to be eating it for a while. And I'm talking plates and plates of shit. So how does this affect Triple H's career had this incident not happened? I'm really only going to go and take it one full year basically from late May to June of 1996, and map it out until June of 1997, and I'll explain why at the end. It will actually become pretty clear why. In 1996, coming up that next month, their pay-per-view was King of the Ring. And for 1996, at the time, I'm just going to call him Triple H for this video. Triple H was slated to win the King of the Ring. Obviously, that didn't happen. And a guy who had just dumped his manager of Ted DiBiase was the one who was then pivoted and chosen to win King of the Ring. That being a guy by the name of Stone Cold Steve Austin. So yes, we could have had a very different ending, well, not ending to King of the Ring, but an ending of the King of the Ring tournament. And we may never have gotten that iconic speech now, where after Stone Cold beats Jake the Snake Roberts, basically dominates pretty much the entire match. He's slapping him around, telling him you're pathetic, and he's working on the injured ribs of Jake Roberts because they had done an injury angle earlier when Jake Roberts got Vader bombed. They have Austin go over Jake Roberts pretty decisively. He gets up on the podium where the crown and scepter and King's throne is. Doc Hendricks, then known as Doc Hendricks, everyone knows him now as Michael P.S. Hayes, I believe, interviews Stone Cold, talks about an incredible victory for him, and Stone Cold obviously gets on the mic, tells everyone, get that piece of crap known as Jake Roberts out of my ring, and tells them, you clearly don't have what it takes anymore. And he says, talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. And then he says the famous line, which apparently was suggested by Jake the Snake Roberts. And he said, Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass. Then you get Doc Hendricks with, come on, that's not necessary. I always found that funny for some reason. So the big thing is, we may never get that iconic speech. And the highest grossing, highest selling t-shirt the WWE, WWF has ever had is that famous Austin 3:16 shirt. That is the most successfully sold shirt in WWF history. So right off the bat, that's a big revenue loss for WWF. And obviously, some people believe that could have delayed the ascension of Stone Cold. Now, I want to stick with this topic for a second in terms of Stone Cold and what it would have done for his career. Again, this is before the neck injury, and he was still an excellent technical wrestler, and he could do more than just the brawling that he became known for during the Attitude Era, because that neck injury really forced him to change his wrestling style from a mat wrestler and technician to really just a guy who threw punches, kicks, and utilized the ring as a weapon around him. The tables, the steps, the steel post, etc. The reason why I actually don't think it would have affected it quite as much as people believe is, yes, there were some Austin 3:16 signs starting the summer of 1996, but people, and Jason Solomon, owner of Solomonster Sounds Off, his podcast, I know a lot of people have come to this channel because of the Solomonster. He's referenced this before. It wasn't like Austin was then catapulted overnight and became a megastar. Because 2 months later, at SummerSlam, he wasn't even on the main card. He was in the free-for-all. The free-for-all was a 30-minute pre-show they did on the old preview channel to get ready for a pay-per-view, wrestling in a 2 or 3 minute match against Yokozuna, who was well on his way out of the company at the time. He was being jobbed out anyways. So he was still not high up on the card, and he was still in, mid-card or opening card matches. It's not like he was getting shots at the WWF title immediately. What really, in my opinion, helped solidify Stone Cold was Bret Hart had been watching him from his home in Calgary after leaving after WrestleMania 12, after that Iron Man match against Shawn Michaels, and he took notice of Austin, and I know that Bret Hart talked to Austin about this on his podcast. He saw him working on Raw with Shawn Michaels one night, and he saw how talented he was in the ring, and I guess he told Austin, hey, I'd love to work with you anytime. And then you started getting some of the really strong promos from Stone Cold. That September of 96 at Mind Games. Stone Cold comes out with Brian Pillman and Owen Hart, and he's calling Bret Hart out for a match. And he has another famous quote. It doesn't get referenced nearly as much. But he goes, if you put the letter S in front of the word Hitman, you get exactly what I think of you. As a side note, as a kid, that's what made me a fan of Stone Cold when he said that. Because when I realized what he meant, I was like, wow, that's cool. So there was that promo. And then we had a great lead up to the match with Bret Hart. We had, face-to-face interviews in the back. And we had Bret Hart also announcing his return to the WWF when getting interviewed by Jim Ross. And so that was an in-ring interview. And Bret Hart actually really builds up Stone Cold Steve Austin very strong in this interview when he says, at Survivor Series, I will face the best wrestler in the world today. Remember, Shawn Michaels is the WWF champion at this point, but he is referencing Stone Cold Steve Austin as the best wrestler in the world today, confirming he was back. So really, a lot of that build, if you can find them online, if you've never seen them, there were some black and white promos Stone Cold did, where you hear voiceovers, and he's in a back alley talking about Bret's supposed comeback, and talking about his pink tights, talking about how after he lost to the Boy Toy, Bret ran away in shame. And the way they're shot, they were very similar somewhat to the black and white promos WCW was doing with the NWO at the time. But these are really, again, a lot of people I've talked to who are fans of wrestling during that era, they look back on that time fondly about Stone Cold and really feel that's when the ascension was starting. So yes, he doesn't have the 316 moniker maybe, but he really was getting over strong just because of his big personality, strong promos, ability to go in the ring, and just the way he was being booked as a top heel at the time. Again, he's a heel at this point in his feud with Bret Hart. And boy, would that change. And then there was a little bit of, they have the match at Survivor Series 96, which is an outstanding match. A match that really stands the test of time. And when Stone Cold comes out, this is pre-knee brace Stone Cold too. He comes out and Jim Ross talks about how he first saw Austin in 1989, and he could see back then Austin had what it took, and he kept saying, because Austin has the attitude. It's all about the attitude with Stone Cold Steve Austin. A little foreshadowing there. So, of course, even though Bret wins the match against Austin, Austin didn't really lose anything in defeat. The way it ends with Bret Hart scoring the pin while Austin has him locked in the $1 Million Dream was very reminiscent to how Bret beat Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8. And then, of course, they keep feuding through the winter of 1996. They, going at it in the Royal Rumble, having the controversial finish there, and going at it at the Final Four in the four-way match for the WWF title. And then Austin ultimately costing Bret Hart the WWF title one day after he wins it in his match for Psycho Sid on Raw. And I know the original plan was for Bret to face Shawn for the WWF title at WrestleMania 13. But, of course, Shawn Michaels lost his smile, and they pivoted to Bret versus Stone Cold in that submission match. And everyone knows that iconic scene where Brett has Austin in the sharpshooter. The blood is gushing down Austin's face. And they had a war. This is one of the best, in one of the original, really Attitude Era, like no holds barred matches where they brawl through the crowd. And it's really a personal issue. They don't really do much chain wrestling to start. That Brett and Austin at the time were known for. They just go right to the floor and start brawling. And of course, like I said, there's the iconic shot that where Austin doesn't want to submit in the sharpshooter. He won't say I quit. For a second, it looks like he breaks the sharpshooter. But then Brett gets it back on him. And then, of course, he passes out. Brett is the winner, but attacks Austin after the match. They complete the double turn. Austin then hobbles out to the applause of the fans. And then is when Austin his star really starts to rise through that spring and summer. And that's when he becomes more of a main eventer and wins his first the tag titles with Shawn Michaels, and then beating Owen Hart, even after that pile driver that literally almost broke his neck and paralyzed him. He beats Owen Hart for the Intercontinental title. And there's the rise. I know it's the rise of Austin 316, but I feel like it would still, these same things I really think could have happened. I just think his talent was undeniable. And it's the rise of Stone Cold. And Austin has had a lot of great one-liners. I mean, as annoying as it is today, Austin got the word "what" over. So I think that even without Austin 316, yes, maybe it would have been a little delayed, and he wouldn't have the moniker of Austin 316. But I actually do think a lot of the same things would have stayed the same. Going back to Triple H, I know this is a Triple H video, I really veered off, but I really wanted to focus on how I think that wouldn't have affected Austin's rise as much as people think. Triple H, again, had been slated to win the 1996 King of the Ring. And when the Curtain Call happened, everything changed. Triple H, he loses instead in a qualifying match to Jake the Snake Roberts via DDT, then has the snake put on him. And I know he was also, when Ahmed Johnson, another guy they were pushing, and at one point was going to challenge for the WWF title before his kidney injury happened, when Farouk attacked him. Triple H was the first one to challenge Ahmed for the Intercontinental title on Raw, and he got pinned cleanly in that match as well. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what happened to this guy? He had this undefeated streak in 95. He loses his undefeated streak in 96 against Duke the Dumpster Droese on the free-for-all, and is forced to be the number one entrant in the Royal Rumble. This is, again, 96, January of 96. He has the Iron Man spot, and he has a really good showing. He goes like 46 minutes before getting eliminated by Kevin Nash. And then he still wins his matches against Droese. Yes, he did get squashed by the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania, but it still felt like they were putting him in important angles where you can see he was going to be on the rise to the main event. And then I just remember he's losing all the time. So I just figured, granted I was young, I was very, very young, but I just figured that, well, I guess he's just a guy now. I guess he's meant to lose. He's not gonna be anything important to the business. And I remember thinking that, okay, well, he's just not gonna be a star, and he's just gonna be a guy who loses a lot, who challenges in matches but loses. Because not every match he did, but most matches he did at this point, he didn't even get an entrance. He literally got the jobber entrance where he was already standing in the ring, waiting for his opponent to come out, and then he would eat the pin. So, again, losing to Jake the Snake, losing to Ahmed Johnson in Ahmed's first Intercontinental title defense. And Ahmed Johnson, he's famous for being one of the guys, whenever he held up the belt, he always held it upside down. And I remember thinking as a kid, I'm like, is he doing this by accident? I thought it was an accident the first time. But no, every time he held up the belt to display it, it was upside down. I don't know why. But, again, that doesn't happen if the curtain call doesn't happen. Instead, Triple H would have won the King of the Ring in 96. And to be honest with you, I actually think that a lot of the same things, in terms of how the ascension of Stone Cold still took some time, I think the ascension of, at the time, the Blue Blood Hunter Hearst Helmsley would have taken some time. Reason being is because the next month at International Incident in July of 96, a card that Triple H wasn't even on, because again, he was being punished for the curtain call, I feel like he would have just been in a mid-card match. And I think, because a few months before, he had lost to a debuting, or not a brand debuting, but a pretty new Wild Man Mark Merrow in a match at Beware of Dog in 1996, in that May. I think he probably gets his win back, even though I know Merrow lost to Stone Cold. But I think, honestly, Triple H in that match can face Mark Merrow and get his win back. I don't think he'd be, again, immediately challenging for the WWE title or anything like that, because they still had that six-man of Camp Cornette, which was Vader, British Bulldog, and Owen Hart, versus Sid, Psycho Sid, that is, Ahmed Johnson, and Shawn Michaels. And to me, I think they're still going to go that way because they were building Vader to be Shawn Michaels' next challenger. Triple H wasn't in that equation, even if he wasn't punished. The very next month, I know that they didn't have an Intercontinental title match at SummerSlam because Farouk was debuting Farouk Assad, who had, again, attacked Ahmed Johnson, was supposed to face Ahmed for the Intercontinental title. And I believe Farouk might have was supposed to win it, because Ahmed had also been made #1 contender to the WWF title, winning a Battle Royal on Raw. And from what I read, Ahmed was actually slated to beat Vader for the championship and become the new WWF champion. Obviously, none of that happened. Shawn changed his mind, didn't want to lose to Vader. And Ahmed with the kidney injury, that, and also then a weight gain and overall lack of interest by the fans, he never got the push he was slated for either. If the current call doesn't happen, I think actually Triple H does get his first taste of gold at SummerSlam. The Intercontinental title, like I said, I know that it was not defended because of Ahmed Johnson's injury. And what happened was they did a tournament throughout the late summer into the early fall to determine a new Intercontinental champion. They stripped Ahmed of it. And Mark Merrow did beat Farouk on Raw to win the Intercontinental title. This was Mark Merrow's only title win in the WWF, and it wasn't very successful. He only held it for a month before losing it on Raw to Triple H. Triple H had been doing a commentary feud with Mr. Perfect, and then Mr. Perfect and Triple H were supposed to face, but then the whole thing is Triple H attacks Perfect before the match and injures his knee. So then with that in mind, Mark Merrow comes out with Mr. Perfect, and Mr. Perfect says, while I can't go, Mark Merrow has stepped up in my place and wants to face you, Hunter. Triple H tells him, I'm not contracted to wrestle Mark Merrow. I'm contracted to face you, Perfect. You're clearly a coward. The only way I'll face Merrow is if he puts the Intercontinental title on the line. Mr. Perfect then speaks for Mark Merrow, so you can see where this is going. And he says, of course I'll face you for the title. That's the kind of champion he is. Merrow agrees. The match gets made. Standard match, and in reality, Mr. Perfect did a Vince Russo swerve. And he acted like he was going to hit Triple H with the chair. He turns around and hits Mark Merrow in the head. Pedigree by Triple H, if that sounds familiar. And then a 1, 2, 3, and Triple H wins his first title in the WWF as the Intercontinental title. So, Triple H's punishment didn't even last a full 6 months. It lasted from the end of May to like the mid-October. So maybe about close to a full 6 months. But then really, he was back to being, a protected guy. Still had Shawn Michaels as, as someone who was protecting him and basically as an ally backstage. He wins the Intercontinental title that he wouldn't lose back to Mero. He didn't lose it till he lost it to a very young upstart named Rocky Maivia the next year. I believe that in February of 1997. And again, Mero never wins a title again. So what you could do without the curtain call is, I think you can hold the Intercontinental title up, and instead of having what they did obviously was that 16-man tournament, you can have Triple H slotted in as a contender for the Intercontinental title, and you can have him face. Honestly, you can do heel versus heel in this context. Have him face Farouk, of debuting Farouk Assad that he was going by at that point. Reason being is because I know in that fall they did a bunch of what was called tough man contests, and they were trying to gray the lines of who was a heel and face, and it was just guys were just wrestlers. Because I know they did matches like, even though they were both looked at as heels, they did Owen Hart versus Mankind that fall. And I know they did like Stone Cold versus Mankind as heels, or Stone Cold versus Vader, and they kept calling them like tough man contests. So you can have a heel versus heel match here. I'm not sure who the crowd would side with, but they might have gotten behind Triple H at that point, because I know that Farouk in the beginning was being managed by Sunny, and I know that she was really good at getting the people to hate her, both the fans and people behind the scenes. So I think Triple H can win the match there at SummerSlam 96. So that Intercontinental title tournament doesn't happen. I don't think the one-time reign of the Intercontinental title for Mark Mero happens. Not that that really matters, in all honesty. No disrespect to him, but his wife became the bigger star in the company between the two of them, that being Sable. So really, considering Mero didn't have a memorable run in the WWF anyways, it really wouldn't have hurt his career, obviously, because there wasn't much to build off of, and Triple H's run as a champion would have just been started a few months earlier. Triple H still can keep the title through that late summer of August into 97. I know he faced Goldust at the Royal Rumble for it in 97 and won, retained it. I remember thinking Goldust could win it there. They had just turned Goldust face, and I thought he was going to be the one to win it. But then on the special, I think it was just called Raw Thursday. Again, he loses it to Rocky Maivia, who we all know became The Rock. And that, again, is the same time where Shawn Michaels lost his smile. So, again, then Triple H, after losing the Intercontinental title, he still wins at WrestleMania. He still won his match at WrestleMania against Goldust again, this time with the help of Chyna, who had recently debuted. Then he goes on to participate in the 1997 King of the Ring, and he wins the 1997 King of the Ring against Mankind, and that's the genesis of their feud, which went for years and years. That match at King of the Ring, obviously, they would have more memorable matches, Triple H and Mick Foley, but this is the first time I remember seeing a pedigree through the table, so that was pretty innovative for its time. And then also, Triple H, I know that he, again, is awarded the whole scepter, the crown, and he's given the king's robe. And the scene that was supposed to happen for him the year previous in 96 then happens in 1997. And again, he was already off and running. He had been Intercontinental Champion. And then he continued to feud with Mankind throughout the summer. They had that really good cage match in SummerSlam of 97. And even though Triple H did lose that, that same night, Shawn Michaels started his heel turn after accidentally costing The Undertaker the WWF title against Bret Hart, and Bret Hart became the new WWF champion. But then Shawn Michaels basically turns heel the next night in the fans. And then on August 11th, when Shawn Michaels faced Mankind on Raw in his return match from basically originally quitting the WWF after a backstage incident in Hartford, Connecticut with Bret Hart earlier in the summer, Triple H comes out and helps Shawn Michaels beat Mankind along with Rick Rude. And that was the start, of course, of Degeneration X, which became the top heel stable through that late summer and then into the fall of '97. It really screwed over the Hart Foundation because they had been the top heel faction that entire summer, and that was one of the hottest angles in the company, that whole US versus Canada feud. Bret Hart was not happy with Shawn Michaels turning heel because he said it would take away from the Hart Foundation's heel heat, which it did. He was right about that. And of course, obviously, Triple H went to have a very successful career, being a part of DX. And then after Shawn Michaels gets injured at the '98 Royal Rumble, his back gets messed up in that casket match against The Undertaker, hitting the casket after being clotheslined over the top. And then right after that, people forget Shawn Michaels was press slammed out on the outside, which did not do his back any favors. Shawn Michaels has that final match, what we thought was his final match at the time, against Stone Cold at WrestleMania 14. He loses the title. Triple H comes out the very next night and tells Shawn Michaels, "You dropped the ball. But don't worry, HBK, because Triple H picked it up." And he tells him, "Now I'll make the decisions." And he introduces X-Pac as a new member of DX. And then, of course, the full DX army forms, with them also bringing in the New Age Outlaws later that night, when the Outlaws then defeated Cactus Jack and Terry Funk in that cage match. And then, of course, like I said, Triple H had already been off and running. The Curtain Call punishment was long since forgotten. He had been King of the Ring. He had had a good summer. Had a lot of main event segments with Triple H. With Shawn Michaels as the original incarnation of DX. Tying up Austin in the ropes, attacking him when he was feuding with Shawn Michaels for the WWF title. He also got a count-out victory over Bret Hart in '97 in the lead up to Survivor Series. And then, of course, like I said, being the leader of DX, and then his career then on became what it became. So, in all honesty, and I had thought about this for a while, I really don't think it really affects Triple H's career too much. I don't think too much changes for Stone Cold, like I said earlier, or Triple H in the long term. Maybe in the immediate future a little bit. And like I said, the revenue lost in those, if you take away the revenue from those Austin 316 shirts, but you still have Stone Cold being Stone Cold. And again, he was still being booked strong before the King of the Ring win. He was very well protected. He had won most of his matches going into that King of the Ring tournament in '96. He had a victory already at WrestleMania over Savio Vega. So I just feel like, again, his talent was undeniable, with or without that Austin 316 catchphrase. Triple H's career still would have become what it became, because, again, the punishment, once the Curtain Call punishment ended, it really didn't deter his career going forward after that, after those 5 or 6 months of jobbing out to guys, like I said, to the Jake the Snakes, to the Mark Marrows, actually. I remember he lost to Mark Marrow on Superstars in a random match, where, again, he was looked at as an enhancement guy. And, of course, Ahmed Johnson are the ones that stick out. And really, had the Curtain Call not happened, you wouldn't have, honestly, a lot of the things that were considered dumb worked shoots come into wrestling. And, again, pulling the curtain back. I know the first time I saw the Curtain Call referenced in WWF was in '97. As the Attitude Era was kicking off and they were trying to be more realistic. Shawn Michaels was talking about his victory over The Undertaker at Bad Blood at that first ever Hell in the Cell. He's out on Raw and says, let's see the footage. And instead of showing Hell in the Cell, we see the end of the cage match, and then we see Triple H, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Shawn Michaels all hugging and celebrating. And then you see this whole stupid promo, this segment with Triple H and Shawn Michaels looking confused, and Triple H is like, you were a good guy then, and Shawn Michaels goes, yeah, and you were a bad guy. Why is that footage up there? And then they go, oh, wait a minute. That was supposed to be Vince McMahon's biggest day ever, and we ruined it for him. And then they go out to the floor where Vince McMahon was still doing commentary at the time. They mock Vince, and they're like, is that footage still too strong for you? And then Triple H gets on the mic and goes, careful, Shawn, Vince might fire us. Trying to break the fourth wall. Maybe it was innovative for its time, but if you go back and watch it, it's just stupid now. And then they have to bring up the curtain call. They brought it up in TNA in segments because that's all Vince Russo knows, is trying to do inside promos. So you wouldn't have those stupid promos. And then they had to recreate it again in Ring of Honor, and they reference it when Adam Cole left Ring of Honor. He hugs it out with the Young Bucks, and they say, hey, we had the curtain call in 96, and now we have the embrace here at Ring of Honor, the reenactment of the curtain call for Adam Cole, because they basically acknowledged he was leaving Ring of Honor and going to NXT. And then, of course, he was super kicked by the Young Bucks after Marty Scurll was introduced as a new member of the Bullet Club. So we wouldn't have those kind of segments and angles for people's send-off either. So really the curtain call, like I said, I know I keep reiterating it, it didn't really affect Triple H's career as much as people think it might have, especially long-term. It would deprive us of these stupid and now unoriginal segments that try to rip off the curtain call and try to peel back the curtain and get a shock reaction, which really doesn't work too well anyways these days because everything's been done to death. So there's not really too much I can say besides that. So really the two people I wanted to focus on, like I said, really only focusing on that full year of June of 96 to June of 97 is really where I'm going to cap it. So guys, let me know what you think. Do you think that I'm missing something? Do you think Austin's career would have really been halted and stunted without that Austin 316 moniker to utilize and without that catchphrase? Do you think Triple H could have won the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam 96 had he been on the card for that and not been punished? And like I said, I definitely want to hear what you guys think. Give me your thoughts and opinions. If you like the commentary, if you don't like my thoughts on it, let me know why. Definitely drop a comment. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about in the future. And definitely appreciate all the support from everybody.